I'm Lindsay Moore and welcome to my podcast, In Conversation with SMEs, or Seriously Motivated Entrepreneurs. Founder of Agnes Marketing, I'm a business development and marketing advisor to small businesses. In challenging times like these, we need to support our small businesses more than ever. So my aim through this podcast is to bring inspiration, motivation and energy to those looking to start, scale or pivot their business by hearing the stories of others who have been brave, followed their heart, kept their nerve and achieved something quite remarkable. Throughout this series, I'll be speaking to my favourite small businesses and acclaimed entrepreneurs and asking them about their highs, their lows, their wish I'd knowns, and what single piece of advice they would give themselves now if they were starting out. It was a privilege speaking to Andy Poplar, founder of Vinegar and Brown Paper, for the final episode in this series of In Conversation with SMEs. I started this podcast with a single aim, which was to provide inspiration, motivation and energy to those looking to start, scale or pivot their business by telling the stories of others who have been brave, followed their heart, kept their nerve and grown something quite remarkable. And for me, Andy's story is the epitome of this, and I can't think of a more perfect story to end this current series with. Andy had a successful career in the advertising industry, working as a copywriter, but reached a point of burnout and left the industry altogether, wanting to put as much distance as possible between him and what he'd always loved, which was the magic and beauty of words, the interplay of words, and their ability to come off the page and create something much more powerful, real emotion. But thankfully, after a few years, the green shoots of his love for the written word started to return, and he began to explore other avenues for his creativity. He had an idea about etching words onto glass, and within a year, his brand, Vinegar and Brown Paper, had gone viral, and Oprah Winfrey was just one of the people who was captured by the beauty, simplicity, and poignancy of his creations. This conversation was like food for my soul. Andy and I talk about our love for working for ourselves, the sense of freedom you have in being able to explore new ideas, try new things, and simply feel empowered to say no to things you just don't want to do. So sit back and grab a cup of coffee. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Andy, hi. Thanks for being here. It's so lovely to see you. I came across you in your business, Vinegar and Brown Paper, when I heard you interviewed by Holly Tucker, who is founder of Not on the High Street. And this is genuinely true. I was in the car listening to that episode, and I actually ended up getting to where I was driving to and just sitting in the car outside for about 25 minutes because I was so captivated by, what you were saying, and it really resonated with me. And as you can imagine, I'm a bit giddy with excitement today because I'm getting to speak to you myself. So thank you so much for being here. Oh no, it's an absolute joy and a pleasure. Thank you. So I think possibly the obvious place to start is by reading out your copy that is on the About section of your website. And if I may, it reads,
yeah, go for it.
Advertising creative gets burnt out by the industry, quits, becomes stay-at-home dad, has an idea about etching words onto glass, sets out to mend his head with vinegar and brown paper. So, can I ask you?
I could have done that off the top of my head. I think I could. I've written that so many times. That was one of the first things I ever wrote, as Vinegar and Brown Paper, was like that resume, basically.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make it as simple as possible so everybody kind of understand where I was and where I was coming from. And it was a big decision very early on because I'd left. As it says in that little blurb bit, I'd left advertising pretty much by having a breakdown and stuff, and then I'd become a stay-at-home dad, and then I started this business, and it was whether I was going to address what had happened to me or not. And very early on, I decided to not kind of shy away from it and just admit to the fact that I'd been that low, and this was me coming out of it, really. So it was one of the very first things that I wrote, and it stayed the same. I mean, like, it's my 10th year this year, and for 10 years, that's pretty much, I put that on so many things. But it's still, I've thought about getting rid of it as well and just like moving on, which I probably should. But my name on Instagram and stuff is Mend Your Head, and it's kind of Mend Your Head and Vinegar and Brown Paper is so intertwined that it's part of the story, really.
So the story of your starting your business then is really rooted in your own personal journey, because I know that you were obviously a very
Yeah.
successful copywriter for the advertising industry, living what many would look at and go, oh my God, that's like the dream job and the dream career.
It's
And then,
dream. Yeah, I mean, from a kid, I always wanted to be a copywriter, which is a strange ambition. But I used to love adverts, and I thought that would be the job. I was very bookish as a kid, and I like writing, but I've got a very short attention span. Whereas, so adverts are perfect for me because it's kind of, you're trying to convey feelings in short matters of time. But then, yeah, I worked in advertising for 10 years, and a lot of the time it was a brilliant job. But then it gets to the point where it's no longer a brilliant job, and you're kind of burnt out, I guess.
and what was it? Did you feel that, because obviously you were a creative, and a copywriter has to be very in tune with their creativity and their an emotion, because you're wanting to people to connect with words on the page, or what they're listening to on a radio or whatever it might be, and like you say, distilled down to something very short. So you've really got to grab people through that emotion. So I'm interested because I've worked in marketing agencies for years, not as a creative, but I've worked with creatives, and I've always just been so in admiration of how their creativity can be. For me, it'd take me ages to create something, and obviously, if you go into if you go into an industry where that's required from 9 till 6 every day, it must be it must be very difficult. You must feel very conflicted a lot of the time, do you?
It's difficult. I mean, it's great fun because basically you're getting paid for your imagination. You're getting paid to come up with ideas. But then the flip of that is you have to come up with ideas, 20 ideas a day, every day. And sometimes, a lot of the time, you have to present in front of the clients. The clients don't like the idea. You have to justify ideas. You have to come up with another idea to beat the ideas that you did last year for the same campaign. And you're on. I mean, it's a great skill to actually. It's a good training ground for creatives because you're at the beck and call of ideas, really. But I think it's inevitable within that industry that you come to a point where you think, I don't care anything about this product or these people or this business, and I've got to come up with something to promote them, to advertise them. And there's a conflict there.
Yeah.
I think what it was for me is that all of the adverts that I wrote had a little bit of me inside them, because that was kind of how I worked. And it just got to the point where I just gave too much of myself away for other people. And it got to the point I couldn't do it anymore, and ended up crying in a stationery cupboard on a wet.
I can totally relate to that. So did you feel really that you were getting almost commoditized, something that is parts of you were trying to be too commoditized almost for the sake of that killer line, or, you were selling your soul? Did you feel like you weren't being true to yourself really by the end? Is that what caused the burnout, do you think?
It's difficult. I mean, I've been over this for years and worked out. It's very difficult to actually pinpoint it. It was that. It was kind of, to be honest, it was kind of everybody. I've got quite, people kind of wanted me to work on things, and I kept getting asked to work on more and more stuff than I could physically manage. And I'm quite a perfectionist. So every time I came up with an idea, I wanted it to be a really, really good idea. And I wanted it to be better than the last one that I did. So I got to the point where I just couldn't beat myself anymore. And I couldn't come up with the ideas that I thought were good enough. I could just go back with any old rubbish or any old standard advert. There's two sides of writing adverts. There's the craft of it and the idea. And it's quite easy to scoot along just crafting adverts that seem fine. But if there's no idea in them, they're just a bit standard. And I hated doing that. So I just got to the point where I just couldn't fulfill. I was too much of a perfectionist for myself, so I couldn't I just couldn't do it anymore because it was too hard to be better than what I was doing.
Yeah. And you
It's
were,
difficult.
no, I totally get that. So really, you ended up in a position where you handed your notice in, didn't you? You.
Well, I mean, it started. I kind of ended up pretty much just walking out, and I was signed off work with anxiety and depression. And funnily enough, I'd kind of flagged this with the people who were employing me a few weeks before that I really wasn't very well, and they'd set me up with a life coach, which which I remember having my first meeting with a life coach was it happened to be 3 days after I'd just walked out of work and got signed off with depression and anxiety. So I went to see this life coach anyway, and basically I remember her sat there with me going, well, why don't you quit? And I'd never thought of it before. Well, I had thought about it, but I'd just never seen it as an option. So the life coach that was being paid by the company told me, well, why don't you quit then?
Yeah.
And so I did, pretty much.
And you had the best resignation letter, didn't you?
It was fun. It was fun handing it in. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us what it said?
It's along the lines of not resigning yourself to a job and a career that you don't want to do anymore. So it's not, it was a play on resignation, and I wasn't going to resign myself to it anymore, and I was leaving basically.
Incredible resignation letter. You're right. You're not resigning to anything by doing something staying with something that was making you miserable and ill. So how did you get from that point to starting Vinegar and Brown Paper? Because I know that you took a while to find.
Yeah, I walked out, I left. This is 2007, so I was 33 then. And then over the next year or so, I was at home. I didn't want to do anything creative ever again. I'd reached a point where I'd run out of. It wasn't I'd run out of ideas. It's just I didn't even want to try and come up with anything creative. And it took me a while, and I was putting just notes around the house, really, just trying to get my head together. And then, my wife became pregnant, and we had a daughter, and I just became a stay-at-home dad. I say just. I became a stay-at-home dad for a couple of years, which was brilliant, and it gave me a purpose. It meant that I didn't have to find another role. I didn't have to go and get a job because my job was being the stay-at-home dad. So it took that pressure off. And then just over that time, I started writing short stories, and just playing around with ideas again, really. And then I was out pushing my daughter in a pushchair, and I just had this idea about putting words onto glass and etching glass, really. And then I kind of worked out how to do it. I had to teach myself how to do it. The reason for etching glass was because initially it was printing onto them, but the problem with printing onto stuff was that you'd have to do large print runs. So you'd have to pay up front to have X amount of things printed to make it cost effective. Whereas etching, if I could teach myself how to do it, I could just do it one by one. So there was no pressure. It wasn't a business thing at all. It was just, wouldn't it be cool if I could do this?
Yeah.
So there was generally no kind of like business set up.
Okay. So you were just sort of exploring your interests really at that point.
Yeah. I think probably there was a little bit in me thinking, well, if I could do this, then I could make these. And I think around about that time, maybe I'd been to a makers fair or something, or there was just, as I say, I had no grand plans. It was the excitement. I'd been a creative that had spent 10 years, coming up with ideas nonstop, and then I stopped dead. And then this kind of was growing back out of it again. I'd kind of reached a point after having a couple of years of just being dead, of new ideas coming through, and it was like, well, I'm just going to follow them and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so I taught myself how to etch glass, and then it fed into, and a lot of the work that I do still, it refers back to advertising. It's very back to that thing of writing adverts. It's basically distilling stuff down to very, very small things that can convey quite a big meanings. And I just started having fun with that.
So I know that you had a remarkable first year for sort of an accidental entrepreneur. I know that you were saying before we started this chat, you never don't really still think of yourself as you don't feel comfortable thinking of yourself as a high powered businessman because you're a creative and you're doing what you love, which is why I wanted to interview you. But you had an incredible first year because you went viral, didn't you? And Oprah Winfrey was in touch asking you to commission things. And
Yeah,
oh my
it
God,
was a
just
bit
tell us about
crazy.
that.
It was a bit crazy. It was I think it was well, it was I'd done a one of my bottles. It was the first lab bottle actually, which says creative juices on it, and that I'd taken a photograph of it, and somebody had shared it on there. It was probably Facebook at the time, I don't know, or Twitter. It wasn't Instagram anyway, and it started going viral, and I was getting lots of hits on my website and stuff from all over the place, America and stuff, and then one day, I started doing kind of interviews in America and stuff, which is kind of really weird. Like when you've been a stay-at-home dad for a while, like you don't talk to anyone apart from your daughter, and then you're getting these interviews from people in America and stuff. And then I got this email one night from Oprah Winfrey's PA, asking whether I could do some sweet. I'd done some sweet jars, some etched sweet jars.
Was that the
And they were,
Lost Mojo?
no, no, it
I
wasn't
love
actually.
that.
It
That
was
was your jar, was it, with your lost? I
yeah,
love that Lost Mojo. I should
yeah,
explain for people who aren't familiar with vinegar and paper.
yeah,
You started off with it, where you obviously you're known for your lab bottles, aren't you, and etching things. So, like you said, creative juices with your, where
yeah.
people can store their creative juices, and Lost Mojo, which is your little Mojo sweet in the bottom, and it's just so clever and so creative and so beautiful. I've got my milk bottle here, which
All
says,
right. Well,
yeah, which says sometimes what you need most is on your doorstep. And oh, don't know, just love everything
I
that
mean,
you do.
it's very nice because it seems to like lots of people have bought into it really. So it was great, and it kind of went it accelerated quite quickly. I mean, I remember, I'd started making the glass and stuff, and I remember tentatively going. There was a shop in Harrogate where I lived at the time, that was like a vintage shop, and I kind of half knew. Well, I'd kind of got talking to them, and basically they said, "Well, do you want to bring some of your stuff here, and we'll start selling it in the shop?" And that was such the biggest rush. I remember going down like the evening after I'd taken it down and looking through the shop window, and it was like in the shop window. And it's
Oh,
that's as a maker, that's kind of that's such a rush seeing your stuff for work, seeing stuff that you do like on sale,
so
and it all happened pretty quickly. Yeah,
and so sorry, I cut into you where you were talking about when Oprah Winfrey's PA got in touch.
yeah,
And what? Oh my! You turned Oprah down, didn't you? I mean,
yeah.
are you
Well,
the only person to have ever turned Oprah down? I think that must be like one for the CV.
yeah. This is like a lesson. Like, don't turn. Um, Yeah, well, basically, like the PA had said, like they'd seen. Um, I think Oprah was putting together some sort of shopping thing. It was like I think it was a catalog basically of. She'd got this brand extension of like Oprah's catalog sort of thing, and she wanted sort of, I don't know, 60 sweet jar. These are proper, big old fashioned sweet jars, kind of doing that I was making at the time, so she could sell them through a catalog and stuff. I don't know. I can't remember how many she wanted, but basically, I didn't have that amount. I mean, I was just picking them up kind of one by one here and there, and it was like, A, I haven't got 60 sweet jars. B, I don't know. I don't really. I'm not sure how much that's going to cost to get it over to America and stuff. So I kind of just politely said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I can't."
Yeah,
And I think they were fine about it. And it's quite a good story to tell, right? Yeah, turning Oprah down.
yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
very strange because this is very. I mean, as I say, like I'm a bit more hardened off, and I tend to check, like think about things probably a little bit more now, rather than just going no. But it was great. I mean, it was very liberating. That's a good point, actually. It was very liberating at the time to be able to just go no, because I'd spent the last 10 years of saying yes because I worked for somebody else, whereas now, and pretty much for the 10 years that I've been doing vinegar and brown paper, the key rule is that it's on my own terms. So like if I decide that's too much of a stress for me to do, or I can't really make that happen, then I can just say no. And it's kind of like, because I haven't got someone above me who
Yeah,
will,
I
and
totally.
that's so liberating.
That is freedom, that, because I mean, I work for myself, and I've worked in big businesses and small businesses, and it's nice working for yourself because you basically just need to work with the people you want to work with, and
Yeah,
you're not obliged to work with. Someone said they had a motto once, which was "Don't work with heads," and I thought that's a great that's a great strap line.
yeah,
And when you work for yourself,
yeah.
you've got that complete freedom, haven't you, to say, no,
I know.
you
I
know
mean,
what, you're not for me, I'm not for you. You're not
exactly.
beholden to
That's
anyone else, are you?
I, I don't have to do that. It's great. I mean, that's the idea of ever not having that ability just to say no is it's horrible, really. I don't know how people work within businesses, because it's so nice to be able to be your own boss, really, and
Absolutely.
only really answer to yourself. It's that's been great.
How you presume, well, I'm not going to presume anything. Did you ever write a business plan? Have you got a 5-year
Uh,
plan? Have you ever operated in that way? What's your
no,
modus operandi, basically, and just to have a
I
nice
don't.
balanced life?
No, I don't. I don't really believe in 5-year plans and stuff. And what I do, I have a very loose kind of way of planning. I I don't really plan, but what I do, I think I've done this analogy before. I think I probably did it with Holly, actually. Is the way that I view things. It's like if you've ever played pool, like the game, like snooker, but anyway, basically, the trick of playing pool is that you need to pot the black ball at the end, really.
Yeah,
But each time you take a shot, someone else takes a shot, and things change. So things are in permanent flux.
yeah,
So all you can do is at the end, you will finally get the right position on the black to pot the black and win the game. Everything's changing all the time, but as long as you can kind of work towards that end goal of just, for me, the end goal is just being enjoying what I want to do.
yeah, totally.
So so each decision that I make has is within an overarching plan of will that make me content, really? Will that make me happy? Do I want to do this because at the end it will make me happy? I don't have a plan of like, by this time in 5 years time I want 10 shops
Yeah,
kind of all branded vinegar and brown paper. That might come along at some point. I don't think it will. I don't really want that. It's kind of, it's a looseness. It's not unplanned. It's a very overarching guide of just decisions made on the longer term goal of, would that make me happy?
yeah, isn't that great? And my mum, I used to get really stressed as a little girl because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and all my friends knew what they were going to do when they grew up. And I was like, well, Mum, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. And she went, well, you don't need to know what you want to do when you grow up. She said, all you need to do is do what you enjoy, and then you'll just
Yeah,
find your way. And that's why my business, Agnes Marketing, is named after my mum, because that's basically
yeah,
what I've
okay,
only ever done, which is to follow my enjoyment. And it's a really interesting, I think that makes life so interesting, because you can go down little side streets and meander off and explore things that
yeah.
you wouldn't
Which is,
if you were single-minded about, right, I've got to go in this direction. And I think it creates a lot more innovation and creativity and
oh, totally.
proper entrepreneurship, really, because you're sort of exploring all the time, aren't you, through your own interests, other
Well,
opportunities.
I mean, just on a kind of micro level of that, I have quite a tendency to procrastinate quite a lot, and the whole thing, I'll put it on social media what I'm procrastinating about at any given time, and there's lots of procrastinators like me out there, but I always see it as a positive thing, because basically my procrastination is a lot of the time, I don't really want to do that today. Maybe I'll do this. But then if I do that, maybe I'll do
Yeah.
this. Then a lot of the time, one of my best selling bottles one year was, it was a lab bottle with procrastination unconcentrated underneath. And the only reason that bottle existed was because I was procrastinating about something. And so it ended up becoming a best-selling bottle for 1 year, and and it's this thing of following. I kind of, it's following, it's being loose about things and doing stuff that you want to do rather than. But that's quite an idyllic way of looking at it all. But that's
No,
kind of a creative flow, really. It's kind of like getting it. It's where stuff leads you, and it's
it
being
is.
able to go and explore these avenues
Yeah.
rather than go. If I want to make more money than I do, then I could. I could. I mean, there's businesses who've been in touch saying, "Would you do this for us? Would you make these
Mm.
with our logo on it?"
Yeah.
And frankly,
No.
I don't want to spend my life etching back to the advertising. I
Yes,
don't want to spend
totally.
my life
Because it's not authentic
etching.
and it's not.
It's
Yeah.
no. So I'd prefer to
Mm.
spend my time working on my own
Yeah.
ideas, and following that route rather than following a route where I could make X amount more money by doing other people's. Yeah, you see
Because you're
that. I
being
mean,
true to yourself, and really, I think you can only really get happiness when you are being true to yourself and you're doing what you think's the right thing, and you've got almost a bigger governing mission almost that you're on, because you've got to stay. Because if you're not connected with what's going on in here, your
yeah,
direction
exactly.
is
I
gone.
mean, for example, like this week, it's Valentine's week for me. I'm working on Valentine's stuff, and this week I've got them here. You can't say, but
Oh,
I've made some little I made some little keyring. So basically, the little they're called well, basically it's little keyring, but these are little. They're called escutcheons, which are things that go around key locks. If you can't really see.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, they're really fiddly to make. It took me ages to make.
Mm,
I've only made 10 of them. That's all that I had. The vintage pieces.
yeah.
Um, but it took me far much longer than it should have. Now, if I was doing a time and motion study on how much money I should be making for each thing, these would get thrown out because it'd be like, you've spent how much time making
Yeah,
those?
yeah.
But I don't care because it was a new piece. It was a new idea that I've had for a while. I wanted to do. I made 10 of them. I posted about them on social media this morning. I'm going to put them on sale from Sunday from 8 o'clock.
What have you
But
etched on them?
it says you unlocked me.
Oh,
So
oh my
but use
goodness.
hearing. But so there's only 10 of them. But like I've just posted about them on Instagram, and I've got people saying I'm going to set my alarm for 8 o'clock on Sunday.
Wow.
Now it's like the time
Yeah,
they took far too long to make, really.
yeah,
But it's just such a buzz of like making them, finish making them today. I'll put them online on Sunday.
yeah.
Fingers crossed.
They'll go
Uh,
in like a nanosecond.
but from a financial point of view, I should be charging twice as much if it was like a time and motion study of like hours spent making it. In this case,
Yeah.
then they're not financially viable. But it's kind of a one-off. I had 10 for a piece. It was fun to do, but I'm allowed to do that.
And you, because I know that there's a lot of, like you say, vintage pieces and unique pieces that you etch and they're one-offs. Where do you find have you got an idea that you want to find, like a certain type of mirror or a cylinder of some sort or whatever? Do you go out looking for those pieces, or do you just come across them by mooching?
It works both ways, really, which is great. I mean, I was from a kid. I've always kind of collected vintage stuff. Really strange thing, but I used to collect soda siphons when I was 14, which is a strange hobby. But so it's always been part of my makeup. Is like going to car boots or like looking on eBay or antique shops and stuff. So that's always been part of me anyway. A lot of the time, it will just happen that I'm somewhere, I will see something in an antique shop or something. I do a work-life balance, which is a set of kind of old chemistry scales,
Yeah,
and it says work and it says
yeah,
life on it. It's work-life balance.
yeah,
But I didn't have that as an idea. I was in a shop, in an antique shop, and saw this old chemistry balance. Thought it's a nice glass panel on the front that I could etch. Bought it because it was nice,
yeah.
and then it just sat around my house for a year or so until it suddenly was like, oh, obviously it should be a work-life balance. And
Oh
that's how a
wow!
lot of the people
Oh
do it.
wow! So you saw the
So,
piece, and then the line came to you.
yeah,
I love
so it
that.
sits around. I kind of like put them around my office or studio until the idea drops. And it's a lovely way of working like that because, like, it's the antithesis of back to the advertising thing where it's like you've got to come up with an idea by Friday.
Yeah,
Whereas this, it's like if I come up with an idea, brilliant. I'll just let it gestate
yeah,
and and then and it's so nice. And that's the best thing
yeah.
about doing this is the moment you get the idea,
The
the
buzz.
the it's
Yeah.
just the moment you feel the idea drop,
Yeah.
and that's better than being paid, £10,000 for whatever. It's just a moment
Yeah.
the idea drops, and you go, well, obviously work-life balance.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I totally relate to that because having worked in marketing agencies, there's a certain you'll hit on certain ideas. Like if I'd be working up ideas for a campaign with the team, and suddenly suddenly someone has an idea, and then everything fits into place around it.
Yeah,
And it's
just
the
there's
moment
clarity.
of total clarity, isn't it? And you think, oh my
Yeah,
God, that just works on every level. And
I mean, a lot of people say like, "Oh, your ideas are so simple," and I kind of take that as a compliment because it should be so simple. It should be like, well, obviously, why doesn't that exist yet? Like I do a half full pint glass, and it's like, well, obviously there should be a pint glass that says half full, and obviously there should. And it's a simple idea, but it's back. It's the thing of kind of the simple ideas because they're the best because obviously it just chimes. It chimes. When you get that chiming of an idea, that's the buzz for me, really.
absolutely.
So
So I'm going to ask you now then what I ask all my guests, which is what really is your memorable high from your journey, your memorable low, and your wish I'd known. So if I can ask you,
I
what's
think
your most memorable high?
I think high is probably off the back. I mean, I mentioned briefly earlier, like the first time you see your work in a shop for sale to the general public is amazing,
Yeah,
and there's nothing quite that beats the rush of that because something that's come from your head and you've made it with your hands is on sale and someone buys it. That's like such a rush. But I would say I think after about 5 years, I've been going for about 5 years, and I ended up at Liberty's in London.
mm.
So I had my stuff like on the top floor at Liberty's, and I remember going down to London, and
Wow.
I went down like with my family, and you're kind of walking around, uh,
God.
and my daughter's pointing at stuff, going, "My dad made this," um,
Oh,
and
oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
that's that's just that was a
Unreal,
very
really.
high moment.
Surreal.
Yeah. So I remember going up the escalator. I'd done a TV for them, etched like an old vintage TV, and on the screen I'd etched something, and it was on as you were going up the escalator. I think it was at the top there. I remember seeing that, but it
Oh,
was funny, like my daughter going, "My dad, my dad." But
wow.
that was a good thing. Um, but as again, that was great. But also, that's comparable to the very first time you see your thing for sale anywhere, really.
Yeah,
Um, Lows, difficult that because I still enjoy what I do. This will be my 10th year, and I have ups and downs, but that's just that's just who I am, really. I will I will have some days where I don't feel like it, but I'm very lucky because the work that I do is about ideas, but also the actual etching itself is quite a process-driven thing. So if I'm not feeling in the mood to be creative, I can just do the process, and it's quite
okay.
you
The
kind of get
etching
into a
itself.
zone. So it's quite
Yeah.
yeah. So they pair each other really well. But I would say that the only really low point that I have, and it keeps cropping up, is when you see someone plagiarizing your work.
Oh,
Really,
yeah.
that's
That's just sold it. Yeah. That is a
because
huge,
it's such a weird thing,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That,
especially like from a creator's point of view. Like you look at this and you feel kind of I don't know, just it's horrible. You feel this. You go
yeah,
through stages of rage,
yeah.
and then just this weird emptiness, and then just incredulity that like anyone who purports to be a creative would do something that's not theirs, really, because it's kind of
Yeah,
what's the
exactly.
point of spending the time making that thing that's just the copy of mine.
Yeah.
And the first time that I saw that, it was just very strange, and it just it crops up every now and then. Someone it's kind of weird. You get people who follow me on Instagram will going, "I've seen this somewhere. Is it yours?" And like they'll show me a picture, and I'll look at the picture, and my heart's kind of going, "Please,
Oh,
please be one of mine, please." And then um,
Yeah, because it's
So,
yours.
but
It's like you said before. It's your bit.
a little
Your
bit,
soul is in your. Is it? Well, not a little bit. A lot of your soul is in your work. And if someone's sort of passing it off as their own, it's funny that because it's like people see. I'm amazed by that sometimes because with like any type of creativity, the work and the thought that comes together like we were saying before, an idea drops and it comes together on a page or an image or whatever it might be. And it amazes me how many people will look at that. And I've had this experience. I've been sitting in meetings with people and they go, well, I could do that. And I'm thinking, well, you could now you've seen it. Do you know what I mean?
no,
You could
no,
replicate that, but could you
yeah,
have got to the point where you're actually creating that?
no,
It's bizarre, isn't it?
it's frustrating, and I mean, like, similar when some people go, it's the simplicity of the ideas, but in a positive way. But like, but it, like when people say, "Oh, I could do but they miss out on all of the
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
that's actually got
exactly.
into it. It might appear simple,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of stuff that's gone on in the background. I remember writing an advert once, and I had this client was basically saying, "Oh, we want to change that, we want to change that, and we want to change that." I remember going through literally there was 80 words in the advert. I remember going through each word that I used in the advert, going, "I've used this because if we take this word out, the rest of it doesn't work," because it kind of fits
Yeah,
together like some sort of puzzle thing. It's kind of there's a lot more going on
absolutely.
than
The
it may
words on
appear.
the page, yeah, absolutely. And what about you
Oh,
wish I'd known then, Andy? What would you
I wish I'd known that I could have got 60 sweet jars for Oprah Winfrey, probably. Um, no, I think the wish I'd known is I had a kind of epiphany after about 3 years after doing Vinegar and Brown Paper, and that was that everybody else is making it up as they go along as well, really.
totally?
But I think a lot of people that I've met as well would admit to this imposter syndrome kind of thing where you think I'm going to get found out. I don't really know what I'm doing, and everybody feels like that, really, to some extent.
On the edge of your learning, you never know what you're doing, do
No,
you?
exactly. You don't. Everybody's in that situation because, like, when I started out and I was doing like maker shows, so you do these big shows, and there was these makers who'd been working for years and stuff, and I was there first time I'd ever done it, thinking, "Oh God, I wish I knew what I was doing like these people." And then I'm friends with them now, and it's like they're just as kind of like neurotic and kind of anxiety driven as everybody else, and they all think, "I don't really know what I'm doing. I've just got here somehow by doing what I love." And 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 everyone is really kind of that they just hide it better.
Yeah,
The people who look like they've got everything together, there's probably a nugget within themselves as well that thinks, I'm going to get found out. I don't really know what I'm doing. This just seems to be working for me at the moment.
yeah,
Um, and I think if you can get your head around that, it kind of flips imposter syndrome really, because it's once you realize that's actually just a truth for everybody, then it makes you more confident because you realize you're
yeah,
not the only one there who's just kind of winging it.
yeah.
Like everyone else is kind of winging it anyway.
Yeah, and I
And
also think, I mean, I also think with that as well, and this comes out a lot with the people I speak to for this podcast, is it's almost not putting yourself under the pressure of having to succeed if you try something new. It's almost like the success is in just trying it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But actually, even if it fails, you'll have learned a lot from it. And I think, taking that pressure off ourselves in every element of our lives, but particularly in business, is to think, well, do you know what? I'm going
oh,
to try that. It's like we were
oh,
saying before, going down the odd side path. Um, and if hopefully in not being under pressure to think, well, if I try this, it's got to succeed, then it would make
yeah,
us all much more comfortable with just falling flat on our faces
doing it
because that in its success in its own way is success, isn't it? Because you've tried it.
exactly,
Mm.
exactly.
Well,
So I think I, I'm very different. It's been 10 years, as I say, and I'm very different in many respects now than I was when I first began. Well, obviously, I was a horrible mess 10 years ago, but I'm still the same person. I think I think it's been really good for me being my own boss, really.
yeah,
I think that is the key thing that I've learned, is that I'm much better doing this entrepreneurial kind of thing and working on my own gut feelings and ideas as a way to progress forward, rather than being tied to other people's. I think that's been really positive for me. I don't think everybody is built that way, but I think a lot of people are. And the amount of friends that I've got who do similar stuff for me, who are self-employed makers and artists, and I look at them and I just think that you're amazing, because like you're a sole you're working for yourself. It's you, and you're making a living doing what you love, and the stuff that you make's amazing. And when things are back to normal, you'll be traveling around the country selling at shows and stuff, or taking your stock to shops. And there's this great subculture of makers who are doing what they love creatively and making a living from it.
Absolutely, the ultimate. Well, thank you so much, Andy. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and it's just a pleasure to meet you. Well, thank you very much, and you take care, and thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of In Conversation with Seriously Motivated Entrepreneurs. I'm on a bit of a mission to provide help and support to small businesses. As well as my podcast, I'm working hard to provide lots of helpful and practical advice to help small businesses get really good at business development and marketing, from free masterclasses and cheat sheets to downloadable guides and consultancy sessions. If you would like to access this information, it's all available on my website, agnesmarketing.co.uk. And if you'd like to join our Facebook community of other small businesses looking to access and share marketing advice, tips and support, please search for Agnes Marketing on Facebook. And would you mind if I ask you something? If you've liked what you've listened to today, can you please rate, review and subscribe to this podcast, as it will help other business owners to find it, and it might just provide the inspiration and motivation they need at this moment in time. Thanks so much.